So let's start with AJ Green. The Cincinnati Bengals just put a franchise tag on him. They still believe in him. He's about to be 32 years old. Obviously, he has a long history with injuries, and I think most recently his foot. So, what, from your perspective, are sort of, again, what are we not seeing as sort of the casual fan, not looking at it from a medical standpoint? What is it that you and or the Cincinnati Bengals see in that for AJ Green?
And that's a tough thing to say too. If you consider that, Emmanuel Sanders is 33, Julio Jones is 31, Julian Edelman is 34. And in terms of like fantasy relevant or wide receivers, those dudes are like the OGs. They're the oldest they're the oldest dudes at those positions, still making themselves fantasy relevant every year. And so when you look at, so this is the part where I was like, what I was saying earlier with breaking down specific players. So AJ Green, right? So he's going to be 32 in July. He had a massive reconstruction on his ankle. I remember the first podcast I did with Ben Kukanis over at the Fantasy Free Agents with Joe Dolan and all those dudes. We talked about AJ Green, and at the time he was in a boot. He was on a rolling scooter. He wasn't doing much of anything, and it was like August, and they were saying that he was going to be back for week 8. And I told Ben, he's in a boot and in a scooter. That tells me that the surgeon doesn't feel like he wants him to put any weight down through that foot. So it's a massive procedure, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is, we got to the point where he was doing straight line running in like week 4 or 5. And I'd also said previously, like, until we see him cutting left and right on the practice field and not in an anti-gravity treadmill, you can't really expect much from him. And then inevitably we saw, he didn't come back by week 8. So really, even though he's been rehabbing for the last however long, months, almost a year, he hasn't played an NFL game. He hasn't played an NFL speed, and he hasn't played with a newly reconstructed ankle. Right. And so to expect a 32-year-old coming off of a lapsed season to just plug right back in, like, I don't care if it's Joe Burrow, I don't care if it's, Jalen Hurts, I don't care who it is, like, this is going to be an adjustment period. And I would especially monitor him throughout training camp and watching his practice reports and sort of like what you reading in between the lines between what's he really doing at practice, because at this point I really can't see him jumping, back onto the X spot. Yeah. I really think that's they're going to have to find a way to work him and Boyd in, because you see these older receivers, they slide into the slot, right? So Edelman's sort of always been a slot guy, but then you saw Larry Fitzgerald slide into the slot. Sure. You see these dudes who will convert into a slot receiver as they get older, because they just they're not going to be NFL starting corners anymore, at 33, 34 years old. Right. So they really they rely on their agility, on their skill, on their savviness, on their sort of experience. And they also rely on their dexterity. So their footwork is what people call it, right? And so if he's got a brand new ankle that was, pretty much reconstructed, he's got to move side to side, forward and backwards without pain, right? With the requisite, is what you call it, requisite mobility, like all those different planes of motion. He's going to be using his feet a lot more than just boom, line up on the outside and beat your guy. That's it. Yeah. Like there's a lot that goes into that. And so even if he's rehabbed 100% and is back to the point where he's able to do that, I think it's going to take him a little bit to sort of get back into, or even work into, basically a new position for him. Yeah. So approach with caution, I guess, is what I would say.